Welcome, friends. Let us begin. It is my absolute honor and pleasure to introduce our very first speaker, Sunjay Muralitharan, who has revitalized the College Democrats of America as a national force within the Democratic Party. Under his leadership, CDA expanded into 7 new states, built a robust media and digital strategy, and secured direct commitments from every major DNC chair candidate to elevate youth voices in the party decision-making. As a student leader and an organizer, he has been a driving force in shaping how young Democrats view U.S. foreign policy, progressive domestic priorities, and the moral responsibility of a new generation to challenge entrenched power. Sunjay, it's an honor to have you with us tonight. I do want to lead us in with a question. You represent a generation that is reshaping the Democratic Party from within. How are the young Democrats today approaching issues like Gaza, sanctions, U.S. foreign policy, different from previous generations?
No, of course. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me here. I mean, it's a great honor to join so many incredible activists and just to be able to speak with you as you take time out of your days. I see a lot of people from California. I'm native Californian. I grew up in Fremont, went to school in UC San Diego, and now I'm back in Fremont, gap yearing, cramming for my LSAT. It is not fun, but this is a nice break from that. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I want to start by kind of contextualizing kind of college Democrats in this movement. Because when when I speak to a lot of my peers, especially on universities, they assume college Democrats is kind of a wing of the party. And I don't view it as such. I view college Democrats as a wing for young people to make their voices heard within the party apparatus. There was a time when I was speaking to my political director, right at the peak of these protests, where he told me, it's at this moment, Sanjay, we have to decide whether or not we're an entity that represents the party to young people, but young people to the party.
Mm.
And to me, and what we decided, it's our job is to represent young people to the party. And kind of how College Democrats is built. We have like 500 chapters across the country and tens of thousands of members. These are the foot soldiers. These are the people who are unpaid, who show up to knock on doors, to make calls, to staff campaigns, sometimes for free, because they care about this work. We're not a wing of any special interest. I'm not paid. We're not members of a consultant class. I know some of us are in pursuit of that, but at the present, we're not. And how I like to view it is our work powers this party. And how college Democrats feel is that if you want us to turn out and not just, support Democrats, but do the groundwork that is necessary for this party to exist, our priorities need to be represented at the highest levels within our party. And that kind of takes me into my answer. So when in the peak of these protests, I think it was May, I think like between like March of May of, I think it was last year in 2024, we saw thousands of people take to the streets. Even in my home campus of UC San Diego, which I like to say we're as socially dead as we're civically dead. It's a STEM campus. People don't, in the aggregate, like the median student isn't very politically engaged, but there were thousands of people turning out. And the reason we saw so many young people come out is that just young Americans are sick and tired of this idea that if you're somehow an American ally or have some greater geopolitical significance to the ruling class in power, that it gives you a blank check to violate international law. And the fact that our hard-earned taxpayer dollars don't go to, helping lift people out of poverty or maybe feeding a child who needs an extra meal or helping pay off their own student loan debt or making the economy more accessible for them. It goes to literal bombs, to bomb babies. And that to us is disheartening. And one thing I want to make clear is the media and many people on our side acted as if back in April 2024, the people protesting and calling for change were blanket anti-Semites and that they were fringe radicals that, had no real, I guess, bearing of reality. That's not the case. Countless of these protesters were College Democrats of America, members of College Democrats of America. And and it's personal to me because a lot of them like were my own friends. Like I was participating in these protests, but I had never had a run-in with cops because actually on the day in UC San Diego where they called in the cops to round up the students and parade them and end the encampments, I was taking a interview with the New York Times about the present protests. And my friends were pepper sprayed and beaten simply for expressing their First Amendment rights. And this shows, I think, a clear tragic irony within our party, where they always claim that, oh, you need to fight for good trouble, right? Like John Lewis's famous quote. But when we show up and fight for what we believe to be good trouble, then they bring in batons. And no one was there standing with young Americans. No one was there standing with the college Democrats who were protesting and calling for change. So we decided that what kind of organization are we if we don't stand with our own? What kind of organization are we if we're more focused on representing the best interests of the party to young people than young people to the party? And also, just electorally, that's ineffective. No one likes to be lectured and told that what they're doing is wrong. And especially when what they're doing is morally right. And that was when we publicly called the Biden administration to change course, right? Because what we saw in College Democrats of America was this was going to hurt us in November. I spoke with a lot of media talking heads, and all of them told me that, hey, Sanjay, traditionally, foreign policy issues don't impact presidential races. And I'm like, fair, but you're telling me that those thousands of people who showed up in UC San Diego would not vote if, say, Harris or Biden was explicit about a Palestinian state, like the recognition of Palestinian state, were explicit about, at the very least, an arms embargo for offensive weapons. You're telling me that these people who took the time out of their days to organize these protests wouldn't vote if we showed a clear difference between us and the Republicans? And to be clear, there is a difference between us and the Republicans because when I asked the college Republicans president to put on a joint statement with me, to when the Iran war tensions were at the highest, to say, "Hey, President Trump, don't send us to war," they refused. So just to put it out there, there's a big difference between the college Republicans and the college Democrats. But um, after we put out the statement, which got tons of coverage, we heard nothing, nothing from the Biden administration, nothing from the DNC, and it like no one bothered to even reach out. But we kept going. Our chapters still were the ground zero for grassroots organizing for the then Biden and then later Kamala campaign, right? For example, the ECU College Democrats introduced Harris in their school. The MSU Democrats put on massive rallies for her, and countless of young organizers who are part of College Democrats or alumni of the College Democrats were working on so many of these campaigns. And I myself did tons of positive press for Vice President Harris. I even kind of pushed the narrative that she was a superior option than Biden on Gaza, largely because, she had a choice between Josh Shapiro and Tim Walz, and she picked Tim Walz, who clearly was, the I think the better option of the two. And we kept on going even beyond the loss, right? In Wisconsin, we organized on our 18 statewide campuses, while Elon Musk was actually bribing the college Republicans president with a $1 million check. And Crawford dominated the student vote, right? 9-1, largely thanks to the work of college Democrats and similar youth organizers on campus. To put it simply, even when we weren't heard, we still worked to ensure that our party worked, that our work was still powering this party, that we could still win elections. And we still held the belief that our concerns should be valid. And that's why when we saw Allison's resolution, I spoke with my board and they were like, we should sign on, right? It seemed like a no-brainer considering the stances we had taken. I talked to the high school Dems, Zayed, who's a good friend of mine, who's also pretty open about this issue. They signed on as well. And at the very least, I just wanted to get our concerns in front of the board of DNC voting members, right? And what was very disheartening was not the fact that, you know, it was put to a vote and failed. If we had gotten it to a vote, all 448 DNC members voted and it failed, fair game. That happens. That's how the system works. It's understandable. But they didn't let it out of committee. And that was where I was just like, come on. Like you cannot expect us to believe that this party represents our best interest consistently when you won't even let our concerns be heard. Give us the same chance to talk about it. Like, sure, we can include some amendments. We can add, like we can talk about the hostages. Maybe we can change the arms embargo to offensive weapons. Like I'm happy to work with you all to compromise, but that just didn't seem like the focus. And from what I understood, the perpetual reasoning was that there's bigger things to focus on. That our party is on fire, that an authoritarian asshole, for lack of a better term, is destroying this country. And I agree. Like I, the Cause Democrats of America have been ground zero on fighting Trump across the country in all these special elections, right? But how can we expect the average American voter, the average young person, to believe that the Democratic Party will fight for democracy when they can't even fight for basic global justice? It's all connected. And that's what I think a lot of these insiders fail to see. And I think what this shows is that it is incredibly important that we be involved in these spaces. Because I think one of the disconnects that I see with the young people and how they approach this issue is they're very focused on grassroots activism. That is very important. And I never want to like discount the importance of grassroots activism, but we need individuals like that within these party spaces. Moments like this don't epitomize why you need to leave the Democratic Party. Moments like this epitomize why you need to be in the party. Because this, whether we like it or not, this is a place where we can meaningfully build power, right? And that means, joining your county party as a delegate, maybe your state party, or even running for it as a DNC member in the national wing. But don't stop there. You can also be someone who runs for office too. Call us Democrats of America. We have people younger than me. I'm 20. But like our 19-year-old membership director, he's a school board trustee. Our one of our the chapter president of our largest chapter, well, former president, he's running for city council in East Lansing. A good friend of mine at home is a community college student. She's 19. She was elected to the school board in Fremont. Like young progressives can win. It's the Zohan effect, I think is real. And it's just history moves when we do, right? And it's easy to feel like, oh, we gotta leave the party. There's no point. No, you have a spot in this party, right? Well, I like to tell everyone in College Democrats of America, like, you can be pissed off with what's going on right now. You can think that the approach that the majority of Democrats are taking in Israel is incredibly evil, but still call yourself a Democrat because you're working within the party apparatus to make change. That is what we need right now, and that's what the College Democrats are working to do while we elect Democrats up and down the ballot.